Hello and welcome to video 3 on this video series on how to write Mdd point cache reader for Maya using the Python API. On the previous video, we went ahead and we created the bare bone of our plugin. We got to the point where we were able to load our plugin and unload it, even though it didn't really do anything. But we got that far. Now, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go ahead and handle the initialization of the Mdd node. As you can see here in the code I have in front of me, if you look at the node initializer right here, all we have is a pass, so it's not doing anything at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and start creating the attributes and all the different things that we're going to need for our node. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a numeric attribute object. Basically, we're going to instantiate a numeric attribute. So we're going to do Naddr, that stands for numeric attribute, and then we're going to do mfn numeric attribute. Actually, this is with a capital attribute. And then we're also going to create a typed attribute. So it's taddr om.mfn. Actually, the F is capital here. mfn typed attribute. So now we're going to use these two variables we created to create different type of attributes as we need them. So the first thing we're going to do is create the time attribute, and basically this is going to be the time driver for our reader. The way an Mdd reader works is it needs to know which frame you're trying to read, and then it goes and gets the frame and applies that deformation to your point. So we need to have a time attribute where you're going to connect the current attribute in Maya. This attribute, it's usually going to be hidden because you don't want people that much to manipulate it. There's no real need for that. But you do want it to be connectable. So we're going to go ahead over here. We're going to go and do tdc mdd read.time and then equals and then naddr create time and then ti, and then so basically this becomes the long name for the attribute. This becomes the short name for the attribute. You know, Maya supports long and short names for everything. Next, you need to tell it the type. And this here is a numeric attribute, but we need to tell it what kind of number it's going to deal with. So we're going to do om mfn numeric data, and we're going to tell it that is of type kint. And the next thing is, what's the default value? We're going to give it a value of 0. So right now, we just created that attribute. Now, as you can see here, we are accessing tdc mdd read.time. But if we scroll up here in the MDC definition, we see that there is no such thing. You know, there's no time defined anywhere. So we need to go ahead and define this this variable. So what we're going to do is, instead of putting it here in the initializer, which means that it will only be available if you instance the class, we're going to make it a class variable. So let me type in here class variable. And in here, we're going to go ahead and do time is going to be equals to om.mObject. And mObject is pretty much the most basic class in the Maya API. Pretty much anything can be typecast to an mObject. So we did that, and now we need to add the other parameters that we need. So we're going to go down here and we're going to add him first and then go back and add him to the class where we need him. So let's go to the initializer, and let me add a little more space here. And then we're going to do, we're going to change this attribute a little bit. We're going to tell it naddr set keyable. So right now we just told it that this attribute can be keyed, which usually means that it will also show up in the attribute editor, on the attribute editor. But now we're going to tell it naddr dot, hold on, there's a couple of mistakes over here, naddr, and then we're going to tell it set hidden. So as I said earlier, this is usually an attribute that you can connect to. You don't really usually want to manipulate it. Next we're going to add an offset attribute. I'm just going to type here offset. And this is also going to be a number attribute, so it's going to be tdc mdd read dot offset, and we're going to do n adder create. The name for it is going to be offset. The short one is going to be off. And then what type is this? Is of the same type as before, same type as the previous one. So it's om.mfn numeric data .kint, and the default value is going to be 0. Now this one we do want it to be keyable, so we're going to do set keyable true. Okay, so we have an offset. Now we're going to do a cycle parameter. So we're going to do cycle, and this will allow us to cycle the point animation as it comes in if we need to. Very useful for animation cycles, for background characters and stuff like that. So once again, tdc mdd read dot cycle, and then we're gonna do an adder create cycle. Small name is going to be cy, and then the type of this is going to be om mfn numeric data Boolean, because this is just a switch, and by default we want it to be false. We want it to be turned off. And then the last one we're going to add here is actually we need to change this a little bit, so we're going to do n adder dot set keyable true. So here you're going to see something that's a little bit peculiar about the MyAPI, because basically here we created an instance of the numeric attribute and it became an adder, and then every time we create this, an adder.creates, it creates a new attribute and it returns that. So from that point on, an adder becomes basically it kind of holds a pointer to the attribute that you just created, even though you assigned it to something else, like this right here. And that's why we're able to leverage that and make sure that we basically keep using that exact same attribute. So this 2 over here will have effect on this attribute that you created. By the time you create this one over here, this no longer has effect on what's on top. This line over here has basically has acts on the attribute you created before, and the same down here. So that's why we, with a single numeric attribute, we're able to create a whole bunch of stuff. Now we're going to go ahead and create the file reader. Basically, we need a field where we're going to read the file. So file input, and we're going to do tdc mdd read dot mdd file, and this is going to be tadder because it's a typed attribute. Create mdd file, the short is going to be mf, and then the type is going to be om.mfndata.kstring. Alright, so we're going to do now tadder set storable true. So basically what this tells us is that it tells us that you want Maya to store this value with the file when you save it. So we're going to do that, and then tadder, we're going to do set keyable to false. This is a string attribute, and because of the way that the MDD file format works, I don't think you're going to have a need to animate or change per frame the file that it points to. This is an assumption I'm making right now. Maybe you do need it, but at the time we're going to make sure that you can't key this. So we have created all of this. Now, just like we did with the time attribute, we need to go ahead over here and add the attributes that we need for the class. So we're going to go over here and we're going to do offset is going to be equals to, well, you know what, it's probably better if I just go over here and copy this and change the name. So this is going to be offset, this is going to be cycle, and this is going to be mdd file. We could do this to try to make the code a little nicer, give it a save. So we have created these connections right now. So at the moment we should be able to run this, but the one thing that's going to happen is it's not, none of these attributes are going to show up on our node because they have not been added to it. They've been created and these are just variables that live there, but they have not been added to the actual node. So to do that, we need to go ahead and add them. So let's do add attributes. So I usually like to try wrap this inside a try statement because there are things that could go wrong in here. So let's do tdc mdd read dot add attribute tdc mdd read dot time. So right now we just added the time attribute, and I'm going to copy this 3 or 4 more times. Then we're going to add the offset. Then we're going to add cycle and mdd file. So at this point the attributes have been added, but we have not told it, we have not told this node that, for example, one attribute affects another. So for example, it's very important to set the relationship between the time and this node. So if for some reason the time changes, the node needs to reevaluate. Same thing goes with cycle. If for some reason you decide to turn on the cycling, it needs to reevaluate, because what if your animation is 0 to 10 and you're in frame 20? It's usually going to be frozen on frame 20. It's not going to move anymore. But if let's say frame 15, it's going to be frozen on it. But if you hit cycle, then the animation should go, instead of being frozen on frame 15, it should reference frame 5. So you're going to need to add those relationships. So before we do that, we need to get the node, get the plug or the attribute that is going to be affected by the change. So usually for deformers, that's going to be the output geometry of the node, of the deformer. So we're going to do output geom and then do ompx cvar mpx deformer node output geom. So now we have a reference to the output geometry and to the output geometry. So now we can do tdc mdd read attribute effects and do tdc mdd read dot time output geom. Right? So we're going to copy this 3 times and we're just going to change these values. So cycle will also affect it, offset will also affect it, and mdd file. So if for some reason you go ahead and change the file, you also want it to change. So that is done. Now let's add our exception. And we're going to go ahead and print in here system.standard error, right? And we're going to write here fail to create attributes of node. And then we're just going to give it the name ktdc tdc mdd read node name, and we're going to copy this, and just like we did on the registration, we actually want to capture the error. So we're going to do e, and then we're going to get rid of all this stuff and get rid of this all the way to the beginning. So I think that's all we need to be able to add these nodes. We have the stuff over here and we have this down here. So let's go ahead and go into Maya and see if we can, if this will behave. Let's start Maya. And here it is on the background. Let me bring up the attribute editor. I'm sorry, the script editor. And let's go ahead and try to load this plugin. It loaded, and let's go ahead and try to create the node. Okay, so far it's added offset, cycle, Mdd file, and you can see here the name is like it's setting the attribute TDC read1 Mdd file, the cycle attribute, the offset, and you can't see the time, but if we go over here to Window, General Editors, and go into the Connection Editor, you're going to see in here under the inputs, let's see, where is it? I know we have a time and I know it is there. Well, let me try to do a connection for it. Let's see if we can find it, because it should be there. Well, there's a way we can list them really quick. If we go over here, we can do cmds.getAdder tdc mdd read1 dot, was it time that we named it? Let me go check it out really quick. Over here. Okay, yeah, time. So let me comment this out. Select this. It did get it, but it didn't give us any value, so let's try this again. Okay, so it is there, and it is set to 0, which was the default. So there you have it. We just finished adding the attributes that we are going to need here to our Mdd read node. Right now they're down here. They're not doing anything because we have not yet initialized the form. We have not yet implemented the deform method, which is where the points are actually going to be deformed. So that's what we're going to do on the next video, and that's where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of how to move things, how to move the points, and how to read the data from the Mdd file. So for now, that's it for part 3. I'll see you guys again in part 4. See you.